The Army. Okay, so imagine you're the United States of America. You've just broken up with Britain, messy divorce, lots of yelling, some people got shot, and you need to protect yourself. What do? You build an army, not an army, the original, the one that started it all. The army is basically the oldest child in the military family, which means it gets the most responsibility, the least amount of fun, and it has to share its room with everyone else. The US Army was founded in 1775, literally before the United States was even a country, which is kind of insane if you think about it. The Army existed before America did. It's like hiring a security guard before you've even built the building. George Washington was put in charge, and he had basically no money, no supplies, no proper uniforms, and half his soldiers were just farmers with pitchforks who showed up and said, "Yeah, alright, I'll fight the British, I guess." And somehow, they won. Fast forward to today, and the Army is the largest branch of the US military with around 450,000 active duty soldiers. Their job is land warfare, ground combat, boots on the ground, face to face, you versus me, here we are on this piece of dirt type of fighting, while other branches are flying jets and driving submarines and doing cool stuff from far away. The Army is the one that actually has to go there, like physically show up, walk around in the mud, and hold territory. The Army is divided into different units, squads, platoons, companies, battalions, brigades, divisions. It's basically like a Russian nesting doll of soldiers. A squad is about 9 people, a platoon is about 30, a company is around 100, a battalion is around 800, a brigade is around 3,000 to 5,000, and a division is around 10,000 to 15,000 soldiers. Why so many layers? Because when things go sideways in a war zone, you need a very clear chain of command so that anyone that knows who's supposed to be making decisions right now. The Army also has special operations forces, the most famous being the Army Rangers and Delta Force. Rangers are elite infantry trained for rapid assault missions, raids, ambushes, the kind of stuff that sounds like a movie, because it basically is a movie. Delta Force is even more secretive, and we honestly don't know that much about them, because if you know too much about Delta Force, there's a decent chance someone shows up at your door, not really, but kind of, and then there's the Green Berets, special forces, technically, who are maybe the most interesting soldiers in the entire military. Their main job isn't just to fight, it's to go into foreign countries, build relationships with local populations, train local militias, and wage unconventional warfare. They speak multiple languages, they understand local cultures, they blend in. They are the military's diplomats with guns, which is a sentence that should not work, but somehow does. The Army also operates tanks, specifically the M1 Abrams, which weighs about 68 tons and can travel at 45 miles per hour, which means it's essentially a building that can outrun you. It has a 120mm smoothbore cannon, composite armor, and costs about $8 million per unit. The US has roughly 6,000 of them. Nobody is invading by land, just nobody. The Navy. If the Army is the oldest child, the Navy is the second born who immediately decided they wanted nothing to do with land and just left. The US Navy was founded in October 1775, just a few months after the Army, and their whole thing is controlling the seas, which matters enormously because the United States has coastlines on 2 oceans, a gulf, various seas, and trades roughly $5 trillion worth of goods by sea every year. If you lose control of the oceans, you lose everything. Commerce collapses, allies get cut off, the whole system breaks down. The Navy operates the largest and most powerful fleet in the world. We're talking about 11 nuclear-powered aircraft carriers, and no other country has more than 2. An aircraft carrier is essentially a floating airbase. It's about 1,100 feet long, weighs 100,000 tons, carries up to 90 aircraft, has a crew of around 5,000 people, and can travel anywhere in the world in about 2 weeks without needing to refuel because it's nuclear powered. It is the single most expensive and most powerful conventional military asset in human history. When a crisis happens, anywhere in the world, the first thing the US government asks is where are the carriers? That's how important these things are. But carriers are just the headline. The Navy also operates destroyers, which are fast warships designed for anti-submarine warfare, anti-aircraft defense, and surface combat. Cruisers, literal combat ships, amphibious assault ships, which are basically smaller aircraft carriers designed to deploy Marines onto beaches, and submarines. Oh, the submarines. The Navy's submarine fleet is split into 2 types, attack submarines and ballistic missile submarines. Attack submarines, like the Virginia class and Los Angeles class, are the hunters. Their job is to hunt and destroy enemy ships, submarines, and land targets. They are extraordinarily quiet. Some of them are so silent that even with advanced sonar you might not detect them until it's extremely too late. A Los Angeles-class submarine can travel at over 25 knots underwater, dive to depths exceeding 800 feet, and carry Tomahawk cruise missiles that can hit targets over 1,000 miles away from underwater invisibly. Then, there are the Ohio-class ballistic missile submarines, the SSBNs, and these are the most terrifying things humanity has ever built. Each one carries up to 24 Trident II-D5 ballistic missiles. Each Trident missile can carry up to 8 independently targetable nuclear warheads. Each warhead has a yield of up to 475 kilotons, about 30 times the bomb that was dropped on Hiroshima. There are 14 of these submarines. At any given moment, several of them are sitting somewhere in the world's oceans, completely undetectable, just waiting. This is called the nuclear deterrent. The logic is simple. If you strike the United States, these submarines will still be out there, undamaged, uncommunicado, and they will respond. It's the reason large-scale nuclear war hasn't happened. Nobody wants to find out where the submarines are. The Navy also includes naval aviators, pilots who take off from aircraft carriers. And if you think landing a plane on a runway is hard, imagine landing a jet going 150 miles per hour on a runway that is 300 feet long, moving up and down in ocean swells, at night, in the rain. The hook on the back of the plane catches one of 4 arresting cables stretched across the deck, and goes from 150 miles per hour to 0 in 2 seconds. Naval aviators are either the bravest humans alive, or they have a very specific relationship with danger that the rest of us don't fully understand. Marine Corps. And this is where it gets complicated, because technically, the Marine Corps is part of the Department of the Navy. They fall under Naval Authority, they deploy from Navy ships, they train with the Navy, and their funding runs through the same budget. But if you walk up to a Marine and say, "So you're basically part of the Navy?" you will regret this for the remainder of the conversation. Marines are their own thing, fiercely, aggressively, almost cosmically their own thing. The Marine Corps was founded in 1775, same year as the Army and Navy. Everyone was very busy that year, and their original job was to serve as soldiers aboard Navy ships. They would fight enemy sailors in close quarters combat. They would serve as a security force for officers, and they would be the first ones to land on enemy shores during amphibious assaults. This last part stuck hard. The defining mission of the Marine Corps is amphibious assault, taking beaches, landing on hostile shores, going from ship to land under fire. During World War II, the Marines island hopped across the Pacific, taking beaches like Guadalcanal, Tarawa, Iwo Jima, names that became synonymous with some of the most brutal fighting in American military history. At Iwo Jima, over 6,800 Marines were killed in 36 days. The famous photograph of soldiers raising the flag on Mount Suribachi, Marines. Today, the Marine Corps has about 180,000 active duty members, and it is by design the smallest of the main ground combat branches. The Marines don't want to be big. Being big means bureaucracy. Being big means slow. Marines pride themselves on being fast, light, lethal, and deployable anywhere in the world within 6 hours. They are the crisis response force. When something bad happens somewhere, and the president needs boots on the ground right now, before a larger deployment is organized, before Congress finishes arguing, before anyone has a complete picture of the situation, that's when the Marines go. Marine training is notoriously brutal, and this is not an accident. Marine Corps recruit training, boot camp, is 13 weeks long, which is longer than any other branch. It is deliberately, carefully, systematically designed to break you down as an individual and rebuild you as part of a unit. The psychological transformation is considered just as important as the physical one. You stop being a person from Ohio or Texas or California. You become a Marine. The identity is total. Marines who served decades ago and haven't worn a uniform in years still say, "I am a Marine." Not, "I was a Marine." There is no former Marine, there is only Marine. The Marines also operate their own air wing, fighter jets, attack aircraft, helicopters, making them a complete combined arms force: infantry, armor, artillery, aviation, logistics. The Marine Corps can basically conduct independent warfare operations. They're a military within a military, which circles back to why Marines get deeply offended by the part of the Navy thing. Yes, technically, but also, come on, AIR Force. The Air Force is the youngest of the traditional branches. It wasn't established as an independent service until 1947, which makes it basically a baby in military terms. Before that, air power fell under the Army. It was called the Army Air Forces during World War II. But after the war, military planners looked at what air power had accomplished: strategic bombing campaigns, air superiority operations, nuclear delivery, and decided that aviation had become so central to modern warfare that it deserved its own branch, and the Air Force's rise to prominence was immediate and absolute. because in the modern era, you cannot do anything without controlling the air. You can't move ground troops safely. You can't supply forward positions. You can't conduct strikes. You cannot wage modern warfare without air superiority, and the US Air Force has maintained air superiority over virtually every conflict it has entered since World War II. No American soldier has been killed by enemy air attack since April 1953, not one. That is an extraordinary statistic. The Air Force operates around 5,500 aircraft, more than any other air force in the world. The flagship fighter is the F-22 Raptor, which is a fifth-generation stealth air superiority fighter that is so advanced, the US has literally refused to export it to any allies. It cruises at supersonic speeds without using afterburner, called Super Cruise, has radar-evading stealth geometry, and can perform maneuvers that defy conventional aerodynamics because its thrust vectoring allows it to point the nose independently of the direction of travel. It costs about $143 million per aircraft. There are 186 of them. They are irreplaceable. Then there's the F-35 Lightning II, which is the backbone of modern tactical aviation. The F-35 isn't just a plane, it's a flying sensor platform. It collects, processes, and fuses data from its own radar, external sensors, satellite feeds, and other aircraft, presenting the pilot with a complete integrated picture of the battle space in real time. The helmet alone costs $400,000 and projects a 360-degree view so that a pilot can literally look through the floor of the aircraft and see what's below them. It costs around $80 million per plane, and the total program, including development, procurement, and maintenance over its lifetime, is estimated at over $1.7 trillion, making it the most expensive weapons program in human history. But fighters are just the beginning. The Air Force also operates strategic bombers, the B-52 Stratofortress, which has been in service since 1955 and will likely remain in service until 2050, meaning it will serve for nearly 100 years, which is insane. The B-2 Spirit stealth bomber, which looks like something from a science fiction film, costs $2.1 billion per aircraft, the most expensive military aircraft ever built, and is virtually undetectable by radar. And the B-21 Raider, the next-generation stealth bomber, which is currently entering service and represents the cutting edge of what a strategic bomber can be. The Air Force also runs the Intercontinental Ballistic Missile Force, ICBMs, buried in hardened silos across Montana, Wyoming, and North Dakota. There are 400 Minuteman III missiles on alert at any given time. Each can travel 8,000 miles. In about 30 minutes, they form one of the three legs of the nuclear triad. The Air Force doesn't just own the sky. In a very real sense, it owns the options. And then there are the less glamorous, but absolutely critical assets. Tanker aircraft that refuel other planes mid-air, extending their range across oceans. AWACS planes, giant radar platforms that fly in circles and manage entire aerial battle spaces from above. Reconnaissance aircraft, cargo planes like the C-17 and C-5 Galaxy, which can carry a tank, anywhere in the world within 24 hours. The Air Force is the reason American military power is truly global rather than just regional. Coast Guard. The Coast Guard is the weird one. Everyone forgets the Coast Guard, including, sometimes, the Coast Guard itself. Just kidding, they have a very healthy self-esteem, but it is genuinely the most unique branch because it doesn't always fall under the Department of Defense. In peacetime, the Coast Guard operates under the Department of Homeland Security. In wartime, it can be transferred to the Department of the Navy. It is a military branch. It is also a law enforcement agency. It is also a regulatory body. It does roughly 11 things at once, and does all of them quietly, while the other branches get the headlines. The Coast Guard was founded in 1790, actually predating the Navy's official reconstitution, as the Revenue Marine, a force tasked with collecting tariffs and preventing smuggling along American coastlines. Good start. Very unglamorous, very necessary. Over time, it absorbed other maritime services, the Lighthouse Service, the Life-Saving Service, the Steamboat Inspection Service, and evolved into the multi-mission organization it is today. What does the Coast Guard do? Search and rescue, maritime law enforcement, drug interdiction. The Coast Guard seizes more drugs than any other federal agency, port security, fisheries enforcement, environmental protection, icebreaking operations in the Arctic and Antarctic, aids to navigation, maintaining the buoys, lights, and markers that prevent ships from crashing into things, migrant interdiction, and yes, when required, combat operations. The Coast Guard has participated in every major American conflict from the Quasi-War of 1798 through Iraq and Afghanistan. The Coast Guard is also the smallest branch by far, with only about 40,000 active duty members. For context, that's smaller than many big city police departments combined, and yet they are responsible for 95,000 miles of coastline, more coastline than any other nation in the world. They operate cutters, small boats, aircraft, and stations distributed across the entire U.S. coastal perimeter, plus inland waterways, the Great Lakes, and U.S. territories. The search and rescue mission alone is staggering. Every year, the Coast Guard responds to roughly 16,000 calls for help, saves over 3,500 lives, and assists over 14,000 people in distress. On an average day, not a crisis day, an average day, they do this with aging equipment, limited budget, and near zero public recognition. The Coast Guard is the branch most likely to save your life if you go sailing and make a terrible decision, and also the branch least likely to appear in a Hollywood blockbuster. There is a correlation here. Space Force, the newest branch, the one that sounds fake but is extremely real. The United States Space Force was established on December 20th, 2019, making it the first new military branch created since 1947, when the Air Force was split from the Army. And when the announcement came, everyone had approximately the same reaction. Wait, what? But here's the thing. Space Force makes complete sense when you understand how dependent modern military operations are on space. GPS, military satellites, missile warning systems, military satellites, secure communications between commanders in the field and decision-makers in Washington, military satellites, intelligence gathering, military satellites, navigation for precision-guided munitions, military satellites. Without functioning satellites, the US military would be dramatically, catastrophically, almost unimaginably less effective, blind, deaf, and slow. And the thing about satellites is that they are, in many ways, terrifyingly vulnerable. They travel in predictable orbits, they cannot maneuver quickly, they cannot be quickly replaced if destroyed, and rival nations, specifically China and Russia, have been developing counter-space capabilities for years. Anti-satellite missiles, directed energy weapons, jamming systems, spoofing systems that corrupt GPS signals, cyber attacks on satellite ground stations. Space is no longer an unopposed domain. It is a contested domain, and a contested domain needs defenders. The Space Force took over what had previously been Air Force Space Command, the units responsible for operating military satellites, providing missile warning, and managing space situational awareness. It has around 8,500 active duty members, called Guardians, which sounds like it was named by a committee of 12-year-olds, and is also kind of awesome. And its budget is around $30 billion annually. What does Space Force actually do? They operate and defend the constellation of GPS satellites that the entire world, civilian and military, depends on. They track literally every object in Earth's orbit, over 47,000 objects currently, including active satellites, dead satellites, spent rocket stages, and debris as small as a centimeter. They provide missile launch warning, detecting ballistic missile launches anywhere in the world within seconds using infrared satellites. They conduct space domain awareness, which means understanding what every other space-capable nation is doing in orbit, and whether any of it is a threat. They also, quietly, develop offensive space capabilities. The details are classified, but the logic is straightforward. If you're going to defend something, you also need to be able to threaten the thing that's threatening you. Space is no longer just a high ground, it is a battlefield. The rules, the norms, the laws of armed conflict as they apply to space are still being written in real time. The Space Force exists because the United States got there first and has the most to lose if it loses access.